But so that was only the beginning of Cyrus's conquests. Because when he inherited the empire of Astyages, he also inherited the territorial conflict that the Medes had with the two other great powers of the region at the time, who were Lydia and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. And Lydia was basically a kingdom in Anatolia, which is today the country of Turkey.
Turkey.
Yeah, Turkey. The Babylonian Empire essentially covered the Fertile Crescent, so think like the Levant, Iraq, and a bit of Egypt, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So these two were the other great powers other than the Median Empire, that was now the Persian Empire. And so whenever you have three great powers in close proximity, there's always tension. Yeah,
Like there's a lot
obviously.
of tension between me and you, you know?
Who's the third?
Well, we're the two great powers in this situation.
Okay, well, who's gonna attack first?
I feel like you. And
What the No, no. Okay, I won't tolerate this slander. So the one that did attack first in this case was King Croesus of Lydia, who wanted to take advantage of the situation, seeing that the Median Empire was kind of in shambles with Cyrus taking the charge. He thought it was a good opportunity. Okay, I can get some land for free. They can't fight back. They're busy killing each other.
yeah,
So he tried
they
to attack.
they can't fight back. It's crazy.
Well, so
I know, valid. Like they're disorganized, but little does he know it took him one battle to beat his grandfather's ass.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. He wasn't familiar with Cyrus's game. But so the Medians had territory in Asia Minor, in Anatolia. So the king of Lydia basically tried to take that. However, not only did the Persians fight them off, they actually ended up collapsing the entire Lydian kingdom and taking it for themselves. And without going into too many detail, Cyrus was planning to catch the king unprepared. But when they showed up, he actually had twice as many men as him. So modern estimates, because the ancient estimates blow numbers way out of proportion,
Yeah,
to like they'll throw out some ridiculous numbers like, well, later on, when the Persians tried to invade Greece, like Cyrus's great grandkids,
yeah,
the Greeks of the time were writing that they showed up with 1.5 million soldiers, which is just impossible logistically to have an army of 1.5 million that you're feeding and transporting across like vast swaths of land that's like World War II numbers.
yeah.
So the modern estimates for the Battle of Timbra, where Cyrus crushed the Lydian kingdom, is 20 to 50,000 men for the Persians versus 100,000 Lydians. And
Okay,
somehow
goddamn.
the Persians won, outnumbered 2-1. That rhymes.
Oh, okay.
So they crushed the Lydian cavalry. Most of Cyrus's army was intact. And
Hmm.
then, they went for the infantry as well. Most of the Lydian infantry surrendered. Cyrus, being a very generous king, did not have them slaughtered.
Yeah,
But Croesus, the king, and a few of the infantry were able to get out. So they retreated. They headed to the capital to try to defend it.
yeah. Obviously.
But after the battle, Cyrus headed over to the capital, and it only took 14 days of siege before they surrendered.
These guys, I think it was just a skill diff at this point. His
It was a
MMR was
massive skill diff, bro. Yeah, no, Croesus was kind of a moron, from what
yeah,
we see. And reportedly, the reason that the siege only took 14 days, because, sieges back then would take a long time. You essentially just had to wait to starve out the people within the city because they
yeah.
didn't have like,
A battle of attrition. They could
yeah,
just
exactly. They
they didn't
didn't
have
have like
stocks like crazy
artillery and
to.
stuff to destroy the walls. So if there was a siege, you pretty much just had to wait until they gave up.
Yeah,
It only took 14 days, apparently, because the Lydians didn't garrison a part of the wall that they thought like the ground was too steep near it, and so the Persians wouldn't attack it. But the Persians just climbed and attacked it anyway.
okay.
So that's how they took the city in just 2 weeks. But so Croesus was captured, and basically the whole Lydian kingdom fell to Cyrus,
Hmm.
who his empire now stretched from Turkey to India, which is insane.
Yeah.
Which is just
Was that
insane
like the
for that
peak of
era.
the empire, or
No,
what
because
was?
he hasn't fought the Babylonians yet.
Okay,
So this is
it's
just
about to get a
after the
whole lot
first war.
bigger.
Yeah, a whole lot of red. But so after the battle and having conquered Lydia, Cyrus placed a Lydian official named Pactyes in charge of collecting tribute, and he left. He's like, okay, dude, handle it. You send me money, once a year, my taxes, and I trust you. But almost as soon as Cyrus left, Pactyes instigated a rebellion. This rad bastard
Yeah.
instigated a rebellion against Cyrus.
Or no, he like he planned a coup.
Yeah, so the Strad bastard Pactyes instigated a rebellion in Lydia against Cyrus. Cyrus sent a Median general, Mazaris, to deal with the rebellion. They captured Pactyes. I
Okay.
assume they executed him for betrayal,
Yeah.
for treason at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he sent his day one Harpagus to Lydia as well. You know, the famous
Yeah.
Harpagus
Yeah.
that ate
The
his own
Harbinger.
son and then instigated the rebellion against Astyages.
Yeah.
He was sent to Lydia, and with every city that took part in the rebellion against Cyrus was they used the word reduce. I feel like that's a euphemism.
Yeah.
I assume he pretty much just obliterated all the cities
Yeah.
that participated.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So talk shit, get hit.
Yeah.
And historians say that the subjugation, I love that word, the subjugation of Lydia took about 4 years. So he conquered it very fast. It took one battle, they all fled. Then in 2 weeks, he took the city. So it took only a few weeks to conquer Lydia, but then it took 4 years just to subjugate them and basically integrate it as part of the empire.
Okay.
So just an interesting,
That is very
you
interesting.
can win something, you can get something, your hands on something, but then
Yeah.
keeping it is a whole thing, another thing entirely.
Yeah.
So before we go on to the second major war of Cyrus, he had a little side quest in the east because the two great superpowers, Lydia and Babylon, they were to the west of the Persians.
Okay.
To his east, you have in the southeast, you have India and the Indian kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
But to the northeast, they were essentially nomads because the northeast of Persia is Central Asia.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So these were like nomadic,
Tribes.
horse archer, like think Mongolian type,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that were tributaries to the king of Media. So they were not his direct vassals like Cyrus, but tributaries. I believe is you just pay me tribute, and in exchange I protect you. But
Yeah,
there's
like
kind of
mafia type stuff.
yeah, yeah, something like that. So as long as those Central Asians were paying tribute to the king of Media, it was all
Yeah.
good. But when the power changed hands from the Medes to the Persians, a lot of their tributaries were like, okay, well, look, I had this deal with the previous king. You, Cyrus, I don't know who the fuck you are. I don't know you shit.
Yeah.
And so Cyrus had to step in, go to Central Asia, and basically crush them back into submission.
Got it.
And so he
You have
did.
to mog on them a little bit.
He had to mock them. And then they started paying again, and they were all good.
The rest is history.
And now, the second great power to the west was Babylon,
Neo Babylon.
Neo Babylon, because there was another Babylon, and then they came back. I don't know the lore. But in 539 BC, Cyrus invaded Babylonia.
Okay.
The problem is we actually know very little about the fall of Babylon and Cyrus's conquest. We don't have details about what battles took place, how many soldiers were there.
Yeah.
We know more about what happened after the conquest, like the Cyrus cylinder you mentioned,
Yeah. Yeah.
what's a very important piece of information. What we do know. In October 539 BC, Cyrus fought the Babylonians at Opis, which is a strategic city on the Tigris River,
Okay.
north of Babylon. And we don't know, that's the thing. We don't know how many soldiers on each side. We don't know who lost how many. We just know there was a battle there, Cyrus won, and the Babylonian army fled. Then there was another important city to the Babylonians, Sippar, that Cyrus was able to seize without battle and with
Sipar.
little to no resistance from the population. So what we're noticing is that the last king of Babylon,
Mm-hmm.
who was ruling at the time, was really not popular because a lot of these places that Cyrus would show up, the city would basically just submit to him without a fight.
So they were just saying, yeah, you know what? Take us. Nothing can actually be worse. We're better off not fighting. Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even for Babylon itself, historians are really struggling to reconstruct it because there's a few sources from the era or from shortly after that say that the Babylon was taken without a battle. Cyrus showed up and they just submitted. But Herodotus and Xenophon, who's another Greek historian,
Mm-hmm.
both reported that there was actually a siege of Babylon and Cyrus had to take the city by force.
Okay.
So,
So there's still some conflicting information even when it comes to that.
yes, and to be honest, we'll probably never know the truth because it was so long ago, unless archaeologists find a new piece of document that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Doesn't seem likely or easy.
Yeah. But so this is where we enter the famous Cyrus cylinder
Mm-hmm.
because the Cyrus cylinder was found, it was buried near Babylon. And the Cyrus cylinder is it's very important to us because it's one of the only sources of information about Cyrus which was produced in his lifetime and not after. Like Herodotus was writing about him 100 years after he died.
Yeah.
But the Cyrus cylinder was actually written in his lifetime.
Yeah.
Most likely was commissioned by him.
Yeah. It was
So
still like part of his words. We can still kind of more so confirm that that was like accurate.
yeah, exactly. And so I'll present my view of it, and then you can tell me what you think of the cylinder, because I
Okay.
know that there's like different ways to interpret it.
Yeah.
So basically, what's written on the cylinder itself, it praises Cyrus, obviously,
Of
like if
course.
like he had it
Commissioned
commissioned.
by himself.
Yeah, exactly. It sets out his genealogy and it portrays him as a king from a line of kings. So it talks about his ancestors, how they were all king of Persia, and so on.
Yeah.
And then it contrasts him with Nabonidus, who was the king of Babylon at the time and the last king.
Yeah. The
He's
not was so
denounced.
well liked one.
Yeah, exactly, the one they all hated. So the cylinder denounces him as an impious oppressor of the people of Babylon,
Mm.
and it highlights his low-born origin. So Nabonidus was not from a
Damn.
noble background. Yeah, 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 and Cyrus points it out.
Getting classist in this bitch.
Oh yeah, well that was the meta back then. So they contrast like,
That was
hey,
the trend.
Cyrus, he's a good king, he's nice, and he's from a heritage of kings. Nabonidus is just some fucking peasant.
Yeah.
The victorious Cyrus is portrayed as having been chosen by the chief Babylonian god Marduk to restore peace and order to the Babylonians. So, one of the reasons that people hated Nabonidus at the time is that I guess the Babylonians really liked Marduk. I know they were polytheistic, but that was their preferred god. And
Yeah.
the king actually preferred another god and encouraged his worship. So the people were very not
Mm.
happy with him because of that.
Got it.
The
So
text,
Cyrus used that to his advantage kind of thing, because I did see
yes,
similar sources saying how like he framed himself as a chosen by Marduk, making
yes,
it easier for the Babylonian people to accept him. Seems like
exactly.
kind of a trend with Cyrus
It,
and being
yes,
framed in a way to continuously be like,
yeah, exactly. But that's why it's important to look at things with a critical eye, because we have to keep in mind the Star Cylinder is not this objective, text written about him. It's written as propaganda.
yeah, yeah.
And so the text also states that Cyrus was welcomed by the people of Babylon as their new ruler and entered the city in peace. But again, that's obviously propaganda. Extols him as a benefactor of the citizens of Babylon, improved their lives, restored temples, repatriated displaced people, and so on.
Hmm.
So long story short, the Cyrus cylinder is just pure glaze of Cyrus.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to ask, what's your view of it? Because when I was doing research about it, I saw that there's many Iranians and especially like Persian government officials who talk about the cylinder as like the first human bill of rights and like this important document instead of propaganda. You know what I mean? So how do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, I still think like Persian government wise, I still do think it's viewed. They view it as a sort of propaganda, like as we'll probably talk about later. Just today in Iran, like the view the people have of Cyrus and then the view the government has of him are very very different.
Yeah.
But like might have to kind of agree with the take that it might have still been a form of propaganda while people do like, but it's a propaganda of like his policies, right? Like I think a lot of his policies revolved around religious freedom and being more of a pragmatic ruler. Like we saw, like he even spared his own grandfather who was trying to kill him for decades.
Yeah.
I think it's the same kind of pragmatism and his policies that he wanted to voice and like market pretty much so that just people know, what he stood for, what he aimed to achieve.
Hmm.
But he's also known like in his personal life to have been a very caring person. So like even after he married his wife, I don't know how to say this, Cassandene, I'll just go with that. And a Caymanid noblewoman. They had at least two sons together and several daughters. And there were records that showed that like he deeply mourned his wife's death after her passing,
Yeah.
and he like made it a thing to mourn her death like kingdom wide after she did die. So like he
Hmm.
was like a caring man for his family. I would assume for his people.
I don't know, bro. I feel like a
You don't think
politician
so?
can care for his family. and not necessarily.
I mean, are we talking about bribes here? Like, what are they taking in? You know?
No, but look, I agree with you. I do think that he was probably a very good ruler.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that we have to look at the Cyrus cylinder critically.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
In what way?
it's not a journalist of the era that's writing, this is what I see of Cyrus, this is his policies. It's a new king that took a very ancient city with a long tradition
Yeah.
and had a document produced to legitimize his claim to that city. Uh,
Yes. I
and
think there's like a variety of things that are written on it that yes, some of them are ways to legitimize his rule and others serve as a way to push like his main policies or what he wants people to know about like the
yeah,
type of
I mean,
ruler
it
he will
definitely
be.
still reflects his views.
Yes.
And what one thing that I do find very interesting is the fact that even in that era, in the 500s BC,
Yeah.
you still had to appeal to the public and legitimize your rule. I
Yeah.
feel like we have this idea that we're so enlightened today with democracy, the fact that the ruler has to appeal to the public, and we kind of have this view that civilizations that are not like that, so for example, all these monarchies of the time didn't
Yeah.
have to, legitimize the rule among the populace and the king could just do whatever he wanted with no consequences. So
I mean, they did to an extent. If
to
you
an
think about
extent,
like
yeah,
like
no,
the
no, I
French, let's say, you know,
definitely.
like there is a breaking point. But I think over time it got more and more difficult to question like the rule, you know?
Well, that's why I found it interesting that Cyrus felt the need to legitimize his rule, and appeal to the population, saying,
Mm,
"I'm chosen by Marduk. I'm not gonna be like the other king that goes against your favorite god. Don't worry, I'm gonna." So even though he was emperor, he still needed to get the population support.
yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, he did go about it in certain ways though in achieving it. Like as a ruler, he applied a lot of restraint in the way he treated his people. So rather than ruling through terror or whatever it was, he focused more on developing loyalty
Yeah.
amongst not just the Persian elites, but also the people he conquered, you know, allowing them to keep their culture, their religion. Oftentimes, he would retain the local administrators
Yes.
and respected the existing laws and just didn't want to interfere with their day-to-day life or religious life or whatever it was as much as possible.
Right.
And I think this was his method of, you know, getting them to trust him and also just being like a all around like good lawyer to show them that sorry, good lord or overlord lawyer to kind of keep them in check, I guess.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And it was kind of revolutionary of him because back in the day, if you look at the Babylonians, for example, there was no tolerance. Whoever they conquered had to conform.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't really like a standard policy for people to be religiously accepting since it was such like a pivotal part to cultural life, you know,
Yeah,
religion, especially back then, there wasn't much separation of religion and state. So it makes sense as when it comes to questioning that.
and that's kind of I think the biggest difference with Cyrus and why he's so famous even to this day, right?
Yeah,
The
totally.
fact that he was accepting of probably the first case of a multi-ethnic, multi-religion state.
Yeah. Well, that's why it also said like, you know, he was that's why it says like, you know, it was one of the first charters of human or bills of human rights, specifically the Cyrus cylinder because of that separation because of the freedom provided to the people that wasn't previously provided to them. So I
So I
think
guess you're right.
it's a variety of those stuff that kind
So
of
so it is the first Bill of Rights.
I mean I get
You
yeah,
got me.
if we put it that way then yes. But yeah, like I think in a lot of historians believe that, you know, it didn't come from the fact that he was caring. Realistically, it wasn't like an altruistic
Right.
reasoning behind it. Like more it wasn't very selfless of him. It was more so calculated and realistic, you know?
Yes.
Thinking more so
Like
of
sparing
okay,
his
what is
grandpa.
exactly like what is the best way for me to achieve what I want rather than um, theorizing or just coming up with ideas, you know?
Yeah, no, that
Just
makes a lot of
emphasizing
sense.
his control without pushing people to the side, making people feel alienated.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's so important about Cyrus being a conqueror. like I
Yeah.
discussed with, Lydia and Babylon essentially building out the largest empire that the world had seen at the time,
Yeah.
that went from literally Turkey all the way to India.
Yeah.
But then being a conqueror is one thing. There's a lot of great conquerors in history that their empire falls apart right after they pass. But Cyrus was a great administrator as well. He was able to build this massive empire and then set up a structure that allowed it to persist for hundreds of years after he died.
Yeah. And he pretty much just did that by decentralizing his government. I think a lot of empires tried to do that and kind of failed, but he did it in a way that most authority would remain with him.
Hmm.
And then provincial regions were granted like a lot of autonomy and a lot of freedom in how they govern themselves on a day-to-day basis, and it also helped him expand his empire much more quickly since he didn't have to concern himself with all the new land that he was adding to it.
Yeah,
And this method kind of set up the groundwork for what Darius would set up later on, or Dariush. This it was called the satrapal system, where it just divided the territories into satraps, and each was governed by a satrap, or what we probably know better as like a governor.
yeah.
That I think a lot of empires did, like the Roman Empire, and they were just responsible for collecting the taxes, maintaining order, like applying the law, right, administering justice,
Hmm.
and then raising armies for the great king, who once this was formalized was Dariush.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting the way they were able to set it up.
But on the Cyrus cylinder, going back to that specific topic, like you
Yeah.
said, like a lot of what was inscribed on it focused on providing thanks to the god Marduk for providing him with that the power to become a king to an extent, and I think that legitimized his rule in Babylon. But it also argued for religious freedoms of conquered people and the return of land to the Jews, specifically in Jerusalem from Babylon, which, like you mentioned, provided Cyrus with being one of the few people called like as a martyr messiah as part of the Jewish Bible, or sorry, the Torah. But some of the excerpts on the cylinder include, I declare that I will respect the tradition, customs, and religion of the nations of my empire, and never let any of my governors to look down or insult the inhabitants of my nations. A lot of these are just English translations, rough translations,
Hmm.
but still believed to be relatively accurate. Another involved the abolishment of slavery. It prohibits exchanging men and women as slaves within their ruling domain.
Cyrus abolished slavery?
It is one of the things that was mentioned on the cylinder, according to one of the sources that I was reading. So I guess so. Abolished it specifically in his empire. But once again, it might
Wow.
just be some sort of propaganda, something that he claimed, but that didn't actually go into effect.
Yeah, but the fact that he even mentioned it, because at the
Yeah.
time I think a lot of people saw it as like totally fine.
Yeah. Well, another funny one, or interesting one, I wouldn't really call it funny, but another thing that was written says, if anyone oppresses others, should it happen, I will take his or her right back and penalize the oppressor. So he's pretty much saying, oppress the oppressor. If you
Yeah,
decide to
I mean
oppress
that's
someone, I'm going to
valid.
oppress you. You know, like there's always like a bigger dog.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and then I think like one of the final main lines that he does write is says, today I declare freedom of religion. All are free to choose any religion, live in all regions, and take up any job, provided that they never violate others' rights. So that's like I think one of the core reasons is it's referred to as the first like Bill of
Right.
Rights.
No, I can totally see why.
All that being said, I think we kind of move on near the end of his life and post mortem as well, how he
Yeah.
impacted the world. His death was relatively uneventful, but there's a couple of different takes on how he died.
Hmm.
But before his death, he did properly manage succession, which I think served as another way to maintain his empire, right? And not let it crumble right away. I think Succession Issues, great
Yes.
show, by the way, but being one of the biggest issues for a lot of empires throughout history.
Oh yeah, that's how they all go to shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, he planned that out very thoroughly. And now his deaths remain as one of the most contested episodes of history because no contemporary Persian account of his death exists to this day. So, it was based on a lot of Greek authors.
Hmm.
and a lot of them had different versions of what happened based specifically on what they thought ideologically would make the most sense or literary concerns of the time. So Herodotus, one of the main ones we've been referring to,
Yeah.
claimed that he just died while fighting nomadic people of Central Asia, and then he was killed in battle by their queen,
Slay
which
Queen.
is exactly very slay. Another source, Ctesias, says that Cyrus died from
There's
wounds
no way
after.
that's how you say that.
I don't know, dude. Ctesias.
The
Say
audience
that for
can
me.
tell us how. Ctesias.
Ctesias. Ctesias. Oh, that might be better. Ctesias doesn't sound right. Actually,
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's a weird name.
okay, but no, that's better. Ctesias.
Wait, I can actually.
But Ctesias specifically says that Cyrus died from wounds after a campaign in the east, not specifically who he was fighting or if he died to the enemy commander. And finally, the last source being Xenophon, who wrote, by the way, Xenophon, fire name. That's
Right?
the fire name. He wrote in the Cyropedia and rejected a battlefield death entirely, and he portrays more Cyrus's death as being peaceful and giving moral advice to his sons, which seems a little bit more like TV showish. I guess all of them seem kind of TV showish, but I guess being on his deathbed and giving feedback to his sons is seems interesting to
I
me.
hope Xenophon's way is how it went down.
Why? Seems like the least fun.
You think it's fun to die bleeding out on the plains of Central Asia after a horse archer shoots you in the chest?
Well, it's like badass.
It's badass, but he deserved a good ending, bro. He was a good king.
I can't argue that. I guess yeah, he deserved it, but maybe it was a good end. Maybe he wants to be like those Vikings, die on the battlefield.
Yeah, maybe. But
So
by the way, I googled it. It's Tejas.
Tejas.
Tejas, yeah,
Okay, so I was kind of
apparently.
wrong. Yeah, we were kind of wrong. Okay, but I,
Very.
I said it kind of wrong. I was close.
You were close. You
I
were
was
close.
close. But yeah, all that being said, after his death, his body was taken back to Pasargade. I'm gonna say it like that, even though that might be
Pasargada.
wrong. Where he was buried in a stone tomb, and he is still actually at today. And a lot of people go to see his tomb in
Yes.
Iran. So that actually is a perfect segue to
Hmm.
specifically talking about how he impacted the East and his legacy there.
Yeah.
So Cyrus, specifically in Iran, was seen as, the man who created the largest empire the world had seen up until that point, and as being, the progenitor of what was later known as Persia and then
Hmm.
Iran, right? So a lot of the ideological foundations of the Achaemenid Empire that came after him were founded on a lot of his ideologies. And even in Jewish tradition, he occupied a huge position and he was praised as being God's anointed, right? Just by
Yeah.
helping liberate them. And today in Iran, there's actually a specific day dedicated to Cyrus, which was called Cyrus the Great Day. And it's celebrated by Iranians on October 29th. And it's an unofficial holiday. And it's mostly representative of like today's nationalist, um, anti or pre-Islamic supporters
Do you know
of
why
the
it's
Iranian
October
government.
29?
I am not sure, honestly. That'd be I don't know if it was decided on the day of his death. Let me just look it up and we could cut this out. Was it? It seems to have just been decided to be on the day that is called the 7th of Aban, which is actually a month in the Iranian solar Hijri calendar. That functions similarly to the Gregorian, but the months are kind of like offset. So like half of one month, half of one like Gregorian month is like split pretty much. But yeah, it was just decided to be on the 7th of Aban, but since the calendar is slightly different. It falls between the 30th, 31st of October, but there's no specific reason as to why that day was decided.
Okay.
But some historical records suggest that that's the day Cyrus entered Babylon after defeating the Babylonian Empire. So it's just that they believe he arrived in Babylon.
Okay. Well, yeah, we did mention earlier that the conquest of Babylon was in October.
Yes. Oh, true. I forgot about that. But yeah, all that being said, like it is an unofficial holiday today, and a lot of secular nationalists see it as a way to, celebrate their pre-Islamic identity and cultural pluralism.
Hmm.
So a lot of Kurds, Iranian Arabs, tribesmen, nomads, and other ethnic minorities mostly celebrate the holiday. And actually, in 2016, it actually turned into a protest with, I believe it was 10 to um, 10 to 1,000 or 15 to 20,000 people appeared at his tomb in 2016, and it turned into a protest against Islamic theocracy. So they chanted things like Iran is our homeland, Cyrus is our father, clerical rule is synonymous with only tyranny and only war,
Damn.
which is bars. And they also said freedom of thought cannot take place with beards,
Damn.
which is also crazy. Just a call out of, the very Islamic government and
Hmm.
religious leaders that take up the main of most of the positions in the
Yeah.
Iranian government today.
The ancient Persians had beards too.
Yeah, I think they're talking about the beards in reference to the religious leaders who
Yeah.
hold most of the power in the government.
Yeah, I understand.
But the government actually tried to challenge the holiday in 2017, so the year after. Right before the celebration started, they started closing almost all the roads that led to the tomb. They started planning some, in air quotes with my fingers right now, planning some renovations to the tomb to like preserve it, like within like the week or two right before the celebration was supposed to happen.
How
So
did
they were
it
just
go?
trying to minimize the number of people that can access it. They reduced the number of people who are allowed and everything, so it was not well received by the population, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, but a lot of these people who are anti-government are also end up being the pro-monarchy group, so the pro-Shah, which also just translates to king. And the previous Shah, Muhammad Pahlavi, often used the story of Cyrus as a way to legitimize even his own rule at the time. And he was known to be a bit less pragmatic, a little bit more spend the money on stuff, which is another reason the revolution ended up happening.
Yeah.
Um,
He sure loved to spend.
I mean, the most expensive party in history was held by the Shah.
It was like his wife's birthday, no?
I don't remember. No, it was like a Iran celebration. It was like a celebration of however many years of Iranian history, I believe.
Okay, so it was worth the money.
The thing is, it was only foreign monarchs and foreign political leaders and like celebrities and billionaires that were invited. And it cost, some sources say, upwards of $1 billion, while others claim around the 300 to 400 million mark.
What?
Yeah, so it was like a crazy expensive party. Yeah, so the 2,500 year celebration of the Persian Empire is what it was. And it was held in 1971 uh, by the Pahlavis. And yeah, like I said, it was literally in Persepolis, like one of the
That's
old.
sick.
They planted like around the ruins these massive tents, brought all like the plumbing and did everything, got the most expensive caviars, wines, alcohols, and everything, and it was just like massive party, multi-day, and there was like tents, like high luxury tents for,
What?
like, if you look up pictures, it's like they brought greenery, like trees and camels and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's insane. You had like all the kings and queens of the world that were
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Everyone was there, and it cost so much money, and it obviously got a
Everyone was
lot
there.
of criticism because a lot of people. So yeah, here the cost was approximately to be 17 million at the time, but some others say 22 million, some say more. So it might be exaggerated.
Bro, but he united the world in the middle of the Cold War. Because I'm looking, bro, they had people from the Soviet Union, the US, Germany, Egypt,
Yeah.
like the whole world, people from Japan, the king of Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, it did end up actually doing pretty well. Okay, so like a BBC documentary claimed about 120 million US dollars, but that's also at the time, so adjusted for inflation, a lot more. But apparently, first of all, he imported 50,000 birds into the middle of the desert, and they all apparently died, which is funny.
That's fucked up.
But the Iranian tourism industry went from generating 45 million in 1971 to 152 million by 1976. So in a
Huh.
span of 5 years from the celebrations, the tourism industry exploded by like 3x in Iran. But the problem with that is that it still only benefited people who are already wealthy or the government. And obviously it benefited more middle class and lower class people since more people were visiting and businesses were getting more money. But at the end of the day, the party was spent at a time where a lot of the people were starving and there was a lot of like rural populations who didn't have the same access to daily necessities. So it did draw a lot of criticism from people inside and outside the country.
Well, yeah.
Anyways, going back to Cyrus's, I guess, legacy. But that's about it for specifically in Iran. That's mostly his known impact, aside from like obviously other smaller day to day impacts. But how about specifically in the West? Is there anything you could tell me about that?
Well, that's the thing. I feel like people in the West don't think about it much, but he did have a very big influence. So there's a quote that I saw from a director at the Smithsonian who said that what's extraordinary about Cyrus is that he appears as a paragon of princely statesmanship in the two pillars of Western culture, that being the Greco-Roman tradition and the Bible. So in the Bible, it's like you've already discussed, Cyrus exalted in Judaism the only non-Jew to be recognized as a Messiah and a chosen of God. And that's because he basically led the Jews go back to Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity and
Yeah.
also helped them build the second temple that I think the Babylonians had destroyed. So it's not specific to the Jews. Cyrus just had this blanket policy of allowing whatever religion people want to believe. They can build whatever temple they want, pray to whatever god they want. It's just that the best remembered example of that is with the Jews, since the Bible is such a big deal in the Western culture.
Hmm.
And then the other one, Greco-Roman tradition. So to the Greeks, he was known as Cyrus the Elder, but they mean it
Okay.
in a nice way, like a respectable, wise person.
Yeah. Why Cyrus the Like, was there Cyrus the Younger or
I don't know.
Cyrus Junior?
I think they just called him the Elder as like a wise old man, basically,
Ah, okay. I see.
like as a term of respect.
Got it.
And he was particularly renowned amongst the Greek scholars of the era for his tolerance of the people that he conquered customs and religions. So even in his lifetime, the Greeks
Hmm.
were like, okay, well, like this guy's actually a pretty cool ruler.
Yeah.
And there's a very important work from the Greeks about him, which is the Cyropedia, which
Yeah, I
is a
think I mentioned it earlier too.
yeah, and it's partly fictional, like everything from the era, but it's supposed to be a biography of Cyrus the Great, written by Xenophon in about 370 BC. So that's almost 200 years after Cyrus, but
Yeah.
parts of them are going to be accurate. And it's
Probably
kind of
mostly based on what Herodotus wrote.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But the Cyropedia was looking more at how Cyrus was educated to become the way that he was, because he's seen as by Xenophon and a lot of Athenians of the time as kind of the model of an ideal ruler. So the idea was, okay, well, what did Cyrus do? How was he raised? So that we
Mm.
can also have, mold people into being the ideal ruler like him.
So they were like they were libtards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Greeks, yeah, big time. And so the book was a big hit in antiquity, in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. But even in the late medieval period, it was rediscovered in Western Europe, close, obviously the Renaissance is the rebirth of the antiquity values after the Dark Ages. But so around this time, people were rediscovering all these ancient Greek writings, and the Cyropedia was one of them.
Hmm.
And it is said that even Machiavelli's masterpiece, The Prince, was inspired partly by the Cyropedia
Damn.
because he essentially praises the good things that Cyrus did, but also looks at the fact that Cyrus did use deceit in his,
Yeah.
to achieve his goals.
Yes.
And Machiavelli was, really into that deceit shit.
He was one instigator. Look up to
Yeah.
him. Eh?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, my absolutely. And so there's a story that I like just to highlight how much the Greeks liked Cyrus. So Alexander the Great read the Cyropedia at a young age, so he knew the story of Cyrus, and he saw Cyrus as essentially the model of an ideal ruler that he wanted to be.
Hmm.
And Alexander always wanted to visit the tomb of Cyrus, obviously, because that was his idol. And after conquering Persia, ironically enough, he went to visit the tomb and he found that it had been robbed. Like all the jewelry had been taken. All,
I know
there,
way.
it was very well decorated. There was gold and all. Everything had been stolen. Everything had been looted. So
Yeah.
he was pissed because that's you're visiting the tomb of your idol and it's been looted. But so he basically paid a lot of money. I don't know what the currency was at the time, gold probably, but he spent a lot of gold to have the tomb renovated and have people guarding it to make sure that no one loots it again.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really like that
So
story
he
just to
cared.
show the admiration that he had for Cyrus.
Yeah, not the same that he had for Diogenes, right?
I mean
Imagine liking both Cyrus and Diogenes and being like, yeah, I fuck with
I mean
these
he
guys.
I don't think he saw Cyrus as the ideal ruler. I
Uh,
don't think he saw Diogenes as the ideal ruler. Maybe as the
no, I think
ideal
he was just a
man.
fan. Ideal man? Maybe more so like a fan of his work. Sorry,
Well,
okay,
bro,
we're
he
going off
said if
topic.
I wasn't Alexander, I would love to be Diogenes.
Yeah, man living in a barrel in a
Well,
street.
he probably respects that Diogenes lives outside, the norms of society and
Yeah, I
but
respect it too, touching grass sometimes.
yeah, just jerking off on the street.
No comment.
Well, that's what Diogenes was doing.
Yeah, I know.
But when we see like bums on the street, what are they doing, bro? But when it's a bum in Athens, 2000 years ago, then
Who
it's like a
claims he's a
philosopher.
philosopher? Yeah,
Yeah, what's the
exactly.
difference?
I know Jean Pierre on the corner of my apartment is a philosopher that's gonna go down in history.
With enough time, he will be. And so the last group of people I want to talk about in the West that were influenced by Cyrus were the American founding fathers. The one that we know about the most was Thomas Jefferson. He owned two copies of it. One of them was essentially written in
Of the
one.
Cyropedia?
Yeah, he owned two copies of the Cyropedia, Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
And they the copies that were found with a lot of markings and notes. So he read it, took notes, was like highlighting stuff in there, like a high school book report,
And he was dreaming, Maybe he had like a body pillow of
of
Cyrus.
Cyrus.
I'd buy.
But Alexander had one, and they found it like in some
A
ruins
body pillow?
of Cyrus. Yeah, because he was such a fan.
Am I being messed with?
Yes,
Oh.
slow ass.
Okay, okay, all right,
But they
move
didn't
on.
have pillows back then.
Yeah, that's all I was maybe no, maybe they would they sleep on rocks? All right, all right.
Okay, lock in. So the most important part when we look at what Thomas highlighted, Mr. Jefferson,
Okay.
what he cared about clearly was the separation of church and state and the freedom of religion. So,
Yes, as the US has successfully achieved.
yeah, yeah, they did actually, bro.
Let's move on. That's a whole other topic, I think.
But so it inspired them for the
To
Constitution
try to
and the
do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah, to aim for
To
that.
attempt it.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk shit? What is Persia like now, with the freedom of religion?
Listen, we ain't claiming I ain't technically all right, dude. All right, move on.
Okay, closing remarks. So, few modern Westerners are influenced by Cyrus himself, I'll admit. Or, I feel like most aren't even aware of who he is.
Hmm.
But it's important for us to remember that the West of today is built on the West of yesterday. So, if the ancient Greeks,
Damn.
the ancient Romans, the founding fathers, the medieval era, like Machiavelli, the princes of medieval Europe, if they all admired Cyrus, read about him, wrote about him, talked about him, and tried to emulate him, well, everything that we're doing now is built on what they did. So Cyrus is still a major influence on Western values and history.
For sure.
The comment, the question I have for you, Parsa, and for the audience is who did you think that Cyrus admired? Because we've gone through all of these important historical figures that admired Cyrus, and that Cyrus was basically the person they wanted to be and emulate. But who did he have to admire and want to emulate? Because we don't have much written record before his era, but
I have
surely,
an idea. I have a
yeah,
pretty
go
good
ahead.
idea. My ancestors.
That's your answer.
Yep.
But your ancestors were probably wiping Cyrus's ass, feeding
Hey.
him grapes
Okay. Yeah, maybe he looked up to the same way Alexander the Great looks up to the
to
homeless man.
Diogenes.
Exactly.
Maybe,
But
maybe. But I
we'll
just
never
find it
know.
really cool to think about the fact that like to Cyrus, there were ancient stories told throughout generations, that to him seemed ancient and ages ago.
Yeah,
To
but
us, we
we
don't even know
lost.
who these people are now. Yeah.
Yeah,
And Cyrus essentially feels like the first man in history. Because
yeah.
if you look at people that were inspired by others, you'll look at Napoleon was inspired by Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was admired by Alexander, or no. So Napoleon admired Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar admired Alexander the Great, and Alexander admired Cyrus. You
Hmm.
can do that with a bunch of people. Trace who they admire. It all leads back to Cyrus. Who the fuck
But
did
I
he
think
admire? He's really feel like the first man in history.
the first like notable man
Yeah, like the
potentially,
first
based
man
on
to
what our
leave his
knowledge.
mark.
Yeah,
That we
I'd
remember
say I'd
his name,
say
remember his
maybe in the
story.
east or west specifically, because if we start getting into even older civilizations, Egyptian civilization or Chinese or whatever it
Yes,
is, I feel like we could also
that's
say the
true.
same
That's
about
true.
a lot
But
of different
Cyrus is
characters.
important because we have a line of his like influence and
Influence.
heritage on our world of today. The ancient
Mm.
Egyptians, like Tutankhamun, or
Was not like people
like
didn't look up, like Machiavelli did not look up, where
exactly. There was like it was
people who came
so long
thousands
ago
of
that there was
years later didn't look
exactly
up
there
to
was like
him.
a break because it was
Yeah.
the Egyptians were just so ahead of their time. These people you're talking about were like 1,000 years before Cyrus,
Yeah.
which is just the scale of it is just impossible to grasp.
Yeah. Well, maybe it was one of those people that he looked up to,
Yeah, that's a
but
very
we'll
good
never
point.
know.
We'll never know.
All right.
Well,
I think that's all
guys,
there is to say.
thank you for tuning in to the first episode of the PM podcast. Any closing remarks, Barca?
Nope. What's our topic next week or next month
Let's
or
go
next
play
time?
some league and
We can discuss.
we can discuss.
Okay. Bet duo.
All right, thank you for listening, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Holla back.